All right, I am back here on the Just and the Suffering podcast. Joining me today is the host of the DA show on CBS Sports Radio in morning drive time, Damon Amendolara. Damon, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Hey, Mike, I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Actually, did you know I actually had your producer Miraz on the podcast twice before?
I did not realize that. Did he embarrass the show?
No, he was actually pretty good. He was enthusiastic about his Giants when he came on.
He's normally like that. If you catch him early enough in the season or during the off season, wildly optimistic, and then you catch him in season, incredibly pessimistic, and everybody needs to be fired.
Yeah, I remember I talked to him last year, I think in the offseason, right before training camp. He thought the Giants would win the division.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, coming into a season where the Cowboys had Super Bowl expectations and the Eagles were just a couple of years removed from the Super Bowl, and here he is picking the Giants to win the division. Sounds about right.
Does sound about right. Let's go to New York football for a minute, because, I mean, neither team's been very good for a long time. Which of them do you think actually is in better shape right now?
Well, I guess it's the Jets because the Jets are closer to competing in their division and closer to competing for a playoff spot than the Giants. I mean, last year, obviously, we saw a little bit of a turnaround for the Jets in the second half of the season after the injuries were behind them, especially with Sam Darnold. Whereas the Giants, they just have so little talent and obviously a complete unknown at the head coaching position right now. And what that's going to look like under Joe Judge, who knows? So I think the Jets are closer to competitiveness, but I don't know if I feel great about whether the Jets are close enough to actually be competing for deep runs into January. I mean, could they be a 9-7 team? Yeah, I think so. Could they be a 10-6 team? I think so, if everything breaks their way. But they've got a ways to go before, we can really pencil them in as a team that you could feel optimistic about going into this season with a game plan, an execution, a head coach that you believe in, and parts around Sam Darnold. There's a long ways to go, I still think, for the Jets.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like they might be one who gets helped out if the playoffs actually do expand. So I talked about this earlier in my podcast. What do you think about the proposal to go to 7 playoff teams?
Well, I mean, on the one hand, I get why fans would like it because kind of what you're alluding to, there's another playoff spot in each conference for some team to get in, and we've seen enough teams go from playing wild card weekend to winning a Super Bowl to make you believe, okay, you're kind of never out of the championship race. My problem here is that I don't think it's necessary. I think the NFL playoff system is really wonderful the way that it is. And if it means having to add a 17th game, well, I don't like that. I don't like the idea of an imbalanced schedule. I don't like the idea if it's going to be 8 home games, 8 road games with one neutral site game for everybody. I don't like the idea of that many more international games. So, it kind of depends on the cost. I mean, if it was just, they just want to add an extra playoff team to each conference, okay. But if it's all those other things baked into it to get there, I'm not really on board.
It also feels like the 17 is sort of a way station where we're going to get to 18 games and maybe even just say, we'll get 8 teams in there, start turning into the NBA and the NHL in terms of playoffs.
Yeah, and, the NFL postseason, I don't think anybody ever goes into the playoffs and year in, year out go, boy, there's just not enough teams to make the playoffs. I mean, yes, a few 10-6s that have missed the postseason. That's kind of, they're deserving. But we've also had a few 8-8s to make the playoffs. So it cuts both ways. And I just don't think there's necessarily a need to have more playoff teams in there, especially if it means getting to 17-game seasons.
Yeah, I think the other big NFL thing I'm curious about right now is the whole Tom Brady situation. Where do you think he's going to end up this year?
Well, I personally don't think he's returning to New England. I think he's left enough breadcrumbs out there, and that the Patriots front office, namely Robert Kraft, has seemingly said enough to make me believe that they're worried about the PR of him leaving and wanting everybody to know, hey, it's not our fault. We're willing to go $30 million a year. No, it's not our fault. We pray that he comes back. It's not our fault. We want him to retire or stay a Patriot. That's enough to make me believe they're worried about it. And I think Tom Brady does want one last hurrah without Bill. I really think that there is an element of this that he wants. So my money is on him leaving. And if it's on him leaving, I think there's only 2 destinations that make sense. The Raiders in Las Vegas or the Chargers in Los Angeles. Now, I don't know if he would trust the Chargers organization because there's not a lot of players that flock there to free agency and say, oh, this is a model organization. Now, people don't say that about the Raiders either, but the Raiders do have an owner that seems to be trying to woo him. The Raiders do have a brand historically, and the Raiders are going to Las Vegas with a brand new stadium and a lot of glitz and glamour around them. So I think those are the only two reasonable places for Brady to end up.
Yeah, that makes some sense. Let's shift gears to baseball for a minute. Obviously, spring training started, but the whole sport's overshadowed by this sign stealing thing. If we said, okay, we're putting DA in charge of MLB, how would DA handle the Astros thing right now?
Well, if I was the commissioner, I would have challenged the union. I would have suspended all players that were on that 2017 roster, and this includes Carlos Beltran as well, since he's retired. I would say you're banned from baseball for a year, and I would have let the union come after me. Now, the union might have every legal grievance in the world because the players weren't warned officially or effectively by the league. But what I would be saying if I was Rob Manfred was unacceptable, and I'll take on the union, and then force the union to have to defend 25 or 30 members of the Astros at the risk of alienating the rest of the players that were cheated out of World Series and wins and MVP awards, etc. So I would have liked to see how that would have played in the union. And instead, Rob Manfred took the easy way out, which ended up being the hard way, which was don't punish them at all. Now, if he wasn't going to challenge the union, then I think you do have to negate and vacate the World Series. But he didn't do that either. And so by not doing either one of those things, he left everybody saying you didn't do enough, nobody happy, nobody satisfied, and where we are right now. But if I was Rob Manfred, I would have said everybody associated with the Houston Astros in 2017, you're suspended for the year, and we'll talk after the year, and then let the union be the bad guy.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I also feel like some of the stuff he's throwing out there now at the universal DH and the playoff thing that's been leaked out, I feel those sort of like attempts to distract, say like, I know I got this wrong, but like, look at my shiny new playoff idea. Let's talk about that instead.
Probably. I mean, there are people around baseball that say, no, that had nothing to do with it. I don't believe that, just like you don't believe that. And I think that Rob Manfred has been tasked with a really tough spot where we are in a day and age where if you're not a hardcore baseball fan, you might be slowly or quickly detaching from the game. And that the pace of play might be too slow, not enough offense, all or nothing at bats, not enough action. So he's been tasked with a lot of pressures right now with the league. And this was a chance for him to earn a lot of credibility in a tough spot. Not easy, but he didn't do that. And so now Rob Manfred is going to forever be the guy that went easy on the Astros, and a lot of people immediately not have a lot of trust in.
Yeah, I agree with that. I want to go to the actual teams on the field for a minute. Yankees, I feel like they're obviously the favorite, but if I'm a Yankee fan, I feel like all these pitching injuries already and Aaron Judge having a solo thing, I feel like I'd be worried the injury bug's coming again.
Yeah, I would be too. I mean, last year the Yankees were absolutely ravaged by injuries, and finally getting everybody back after an off season, ready to go, was going to be, the real Yankees. And instead, Paxton going down, Severino going down, Judge, which at least Judge feels like it's day-to-day. But with the starting pitching of Paxton and Severino, that puts an enormous amount of pressure on Garrett Cole. Brian Cashman's proven that he can build a roster that can sustain, just like last year. They got to the World Series despite all those injuries. But before spring training even starts, to have two of your best starters already lost for a period of time is really scary. And I agree with you. It kind of feels like, wow, is this going to happen again to him?
Yeah, it does. And I will admit it's not my problem because I'm a Met fan. I'm cautiously optimistic about this team, even though they have all this stuff going on with the sale and the manager change and all that. Am I wrong to feel like, this team might be a little better than people think it is?
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. I kind of feel the same way. And I think it's part of kind of coming in under the radar this year because last year was once again a bit of a lost season. And they had so many injuries. And then, the explosion, the implosion of Edwin Diaz. I mean, had they simply had an average Diaz and an average manager, Mickey Callaway, that didn't kind of personally screw up games, well, that's a team that is going into the final weekend trying to make a playoff spot or in a playoff spot. And that's how close they were to having a really good season last year. So if all you get out of Diaz is just serviceable and not total disaster, and if Luis Rojas just proves that he can manage by the book and not screw things up by going totally against the grain, then the Mets maybe you don't get Alfonso, maybe you don't get Peter Alonso's season that he had last year. Maybe he hasn't replicated that, but you don't need that for the Mets to be in the 85 to 89 win category in which you're battling for a playoff spot.
That'd be exciting for me because I've seen way too many years where the stuff just doesn't go as planned. It'd be nice for them to overachieve for once.
Yeah, it would be. It'd be nice to kind of come out of nowhere and pleasantly surprise everybody, but unfortunately, not the Mets' reputation, that's for sure.
Yeah, I have some terrible luck in life with teams I root for. Another one of them is the awful New York Knicks, so I feel like are the worst of the teams I root for. But, like, do I have any chance of hope in my life as a Knicks fan as long as Dolan owns this team?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I hate to be flippant about it, but I just don't see where it's going to change. I mean, there's this idea that, okay, when you bring in Leon Rose, he's got connections to players. He's got connections to the relationships you need. But when has that ever helped the Knicks before? I mean, they've supposedly hired coaches or hired Phil Jackson or had Isaiah Thomas and they've gone through all these ideas of, they'll get the connections to the players to build through the free agency. Well, you can't build through free agency. I don't know why nobody points this out, that none of the teams that are good are built primarily through free agency. Yes, the Lakers got LeBron and AD. Okay, that's fine. But they only acquire AD because they have all of the other young players that they drafted. And, oh, by the way, LeBron and all those other young players were awful last year. So you would not only have to be able to take a cut of free agency and land them, but you also have to have a team around them. So the Knicks don't have either one of those things, and I just don't see how it ever changes.
I just wish Dolan would take a page at what he does the Rangers, kind of gets out of the way, lets them do their own thing, and all of a sudden they look like they're about to turn the corner and be a contender the next 2 years. He just constantly feels like he's in the way with the Knicks, and like it's like, oh, the Garden, the Mecca, we're going to sell this to the free agents. None of them ever come here.
No doubt, it's amazing. You know, you could have James Dolan as an owner of both the Knicks and the Rangers. The Rangers could be competitive 3 different times with teardowns in between, in the same time that the Knicks never got it right.
It is amazing, and it's just frustrating because they never get it. It's just so mind-boggling to me because, like, they assaulting Leon Rose. I'm like, just because you bring Leon Rose in does not mean he's going to get his clients to come here. It's not the same thing. It's like baseball where you just throw the most money at them and they come.
That's exactly right. I mean, everybody's kind of dealing with the same amount of money in many ways. You have max contracts, supermax contracts, Larry Bird, right? And so the Knicks don't have spending power, plus you have luxury tax thresholds. They don't have spending power beyond what other teams have. And so then what's their magnetic, part of the organization to draw players in? Well, that would usually be winning. And they don't have that either. That would be a strong organization, a great owner. They don't have that. So I just don't see how it changes.
I don't see how it changes either. One thing nationally I want to get your take on before I let you go is, like, obviously boxing, I don't think I've ever talked about on my podcast before, but, like, everybody's raving about this fight over the weekend between Wilder and Fury. What was your thought on that?
Well, Tyson Fury fought a hell of a fight, and he had kind of the perfect game plan. He crowded Deontay Wilder, didn't allow Wilder's big power punches to be able to hit him. And ultimately, Tyson Fury dominated the fight and proved that he's one of the best stories, certainly in boxing, maybe of any sport in recent memory. I mean, this is a guy that was dealing with suicidal tendencies and manic depressive tendencies and alcohol abuse, substance abuse, cocaine abuse, and goes from 150 pounds overweight to heavyweight champion of the world in a dominant fashion. So that turnaround by Tyson Fury is just a remarkable turnaround, and he owned the fight on Saturday. He dominated.
Yeah, I mean, nice to see boxing actually make a comeback. I feel like until this, I feel like every sort of big event was sort of like overhyped and didn't deliver. Like, I remember a few years ago, I bought with my friends the Pacquiao Mayweather fight. It was just so underwhelming.
Well, yeah, everybody around boxing knew that that was well too late for Pacquiao and Mayweather to be fighting. Both those guys have passed their prime. Pacquiao was a very, very back end of his career, one last money grab. And so, yeah, boxing has not had a lot of tier A draws in a long time. This is one of them because of the heavyweight division. And I don't know if this really lived up to it. I mean, Tyson Fury lived up to it. I don't know if the Wilder did. But that's the big problem with boxing. They just don't have enough events to really captivate a casual audience.
Well, there you have it. Going around the New York sports, a little bit of national stuff with Damon Amendolara. Damon, thanks for all the time today. I really appreciate it. Before I let you go, can you tell everybody how to follow you on social media and what you're up to on the DA show in the mornings?
Yeah, not a problem. We do morning drive on CBS Sports Radio, so you can find that across the country in a number of affiliates. But really, in podcast form, our full episodes are there, and the best of episodes are there as well. So you can find us in all the podcast forms. You can stream us. Just watch the show at watchda.com. And it's a great group of guys that I work with. It's really, we have fun every morning, great chemistry. We've been working together for a number of years, so everybody kind of gets along, but is able to bust chops as well. And we like to take kind of a lighter side of sports most of the time. So it's been a lot of fun, and we're looking forward to the spring with the March Madness coming up here.
Yeah, March Madness will definitely be fun. I also want to say I really appreciate you coming on with me because, I've heard you talk twice at Iona College. You came down to speak to the grad parents. Being able to talk to you is a real treat.
I appreciate that, Mike. Very nice of you to say that, man. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks again. I appreciate it.
You got it, Mike.